The silence in the hotel room was absolute, broken only by the sharp, metallic snap of Julian fastening his designer watch. "Don't look at me like that, Richard," he said, adjusting his collar in the mirror. "You know how hard these budget cycles are. We all have to make sacrifices for the greater good of Nebula Cloud Dynamics." I didn't answer. I just stared at the ceiling tile above his shoulder, the one stained with a watermark that looked like a fading bruise. I was 65 years old, my joints ached when it rained, and I had just been denied the promotion I had been promised for the last 4 years. Julian Thorne, a man 20 years my junior and the CEO of Nebula, didn't wait for a response. He slid his suit jacket on, checking his reflection one last time. "Back to business," he murmured, more to himself than to me. The cold air from the hotel's climate control system finally touched my skin, bringing a stark clarity to the situation. I had built his budget. I had optimized it, stitched it together from the scraps they called legacy code until the damn thing ran smoother than his imported sports car. 8 years, 47 deployed modules, 3 nightmarish architectural pivots, and 1 personal non-disclosure agreement I never signed because Julian said it was just a formality we could handle later. Today, when I formally requested the raise and the senior VP title that came with it, he laughed. He literally laughed while checking his emails. "Come on, Richard, you're essential. We all know that." "But raises? That's a conversation for big-picture thinkers. You're our best mechanic, but we need visionaries driving the car." He left a patronizing pat on my shoulder when he said it. I didn't brush it off. Instead, I waited until the door clicked shut behind him, opened the minibar, and poured myself a glass of overpriced scotch I swore I wouldn't touch. The code was still mine. The architecture, the skeleton they paraded at every damn investor showcase, was born from the 3 sleepless weeks I spent living off stale coffee and dry crackers in a rented basement apartment that smelled like mildew and desperation. They didn't own that, but someone else might want to, especially the competitors across the valley, especially since I still held the original development environment. And the patent? Well, that is where things get genuinely interesting. The patent sat in a dusty digital folder on a physical hard drive labeled Archives, Do Not Delete. Seriously, I almost didn't open it, as if it might disintegrate if I accessed it. A relic from a version of me that still believed in late nights, shared credit, and corporate executives who used phrases like, "We're a family here." But there it was. U.S. Patent Number 104,59821, filed by Richard Vance. Method for dynamic predictive load distribution in asynchronous modular environments. Their holy grail, my creation, and the signature? Not from Nebula Cloud Dynamics. Not from Julian Thorne, just mine. Because I filed it as an individual after a back-end summit in 2018, where Julian passed out drunk in a VIP lounge and mumbled that nobody was going to bother filing anything until the 4th quarter because the legal department was a graveyard. I remembered nodding, smiling, then going home and spending my entire Sunday on the United States Patent and Trademark Office website, while his hangover turned into a team-wide rant about toxic sprint velocities. They never even noticed. I sat on that secret for years. Not to be strategic, just forgotten. Life got in the way. Burnout, medical bills, gaslighting, and quarterly reviews. A brief, stupid period where I almost mentored a young DevOps guy named Eli, who once asked me if I needed help understanding basic TLS certificates, completely unaware. I had written half the encryption module he was studying. And now, that signature was a guillotine humming softly over their necks. The question wasn't if I would use it, it was how. I spent the next 4 days quietly rebuilding the prototype in a private container on a borrowed offshore server, operating under a pseudonym that wouldn't trigger their security software. I routed my connection through a VPN in Iceland and renamed my laptop's hostname to something entirely innocuous. Every time I received a message from Julian with a thumbs-up emoji or some forwarded article titled "Top Engineers Who Know Their Place," my fingers moved faster across the mechanical keyboard. By Thursday, I had a working minimum viable product. By Friday, I secured a meeting with Aegis Systems. And by Monday, I was no longer Richard Vance, Senior Integration Specialist at Nebula. I was Richard Vance, primary patent holder and sole licenser. Aegis Systems, Nebula's biggest rival, was very, very interested. Their vice president of engineering, a formidable woman named Sylvia Cross with zero time for small talk, scanned the patent number, raised one sharp eyebrow, and leaned forward. "This is real." I slid the encrypted flash drive across the glass conference table like it was a loaded weapon. "Not just real," I said, my voice steady despite the adrenaline. "Still deployed. 8 years. Nebula built their entire cloud orchestration stack on it." Sylvia didn't look impressed, she looked predatory. "Original filing is yours. Proof of authorship? Time-smated source code, DevOps deployment logs, and the original version control commit chain," I replied. She leaned back, tapping a silver pen against her chin. "You know this is going to start a bloodbath in the sector." "They already started it," I said. "They just laughed too hard to hear the first shot." Sylvia smirked. How poetic. 10 minutes later, we were reviewing contracts that could have suffocated a corporate lawyer. By hour 2, I had a highly lucrative licensing deal proposal in my inbox. And by hour 4, Aegis's legal team had already flagged 22 instances of copyright violation in the public documentation of Nebula's developer blog. But that wasn't the fun part. The fun part came that evening when I quietly uploaded version 2.1 of the engine. It was cleaned, optimized, and packed with 3 new features Aegis had been dying to crack for 2 fiscal years. No open source. No attribution to Nebula. Fully proprietary. Fully mine. And now, fully Aegis's. I sent a formal licensing notice to my ex-company the next morning. Subject line: licensing violation and IP. Infringement review action required. Julian probably didn't even open it until his artisanal matcha latte was lukewarm. But when he did, I bet he choked on it. Attached to that email, in a high-resolution, uneditable PDF format, was a cover letter signed by me, Richard Vance, patent holder, and below that, Aegis's warning. "You are currently operating production software in breach of intellectual property rights. Please respond within 48 hours to negotiate licensing terms. Failure to comply will result in immediate legal action and platform-wide takedown notices." I didn't hear the scream from his corner office, but I felt the shockwave. Within the next hour, my old enterprise login was summarily revoked. My calendar was wiped clean, my work email locked out, but my personal phone lit up like a switchboard during a crisis. "What is this? Call me right now." "Richard, we need to talk. Did you seriously send this? Please tell me this is a joke. I know you're upset about the promotion. Let's be rational." And finally, a text from Julian himself. "You vindictive old fool. You have no idea what you've done." Oh, but I did. I had finally written my resignation letter. They called it a misunderstanding, naturally. The initial email from Nebula's general counsel opened with, "We believe there has been some confusion regarding the ownership of this codebase." Confusion. Is that what we were calling 8 years of uncompensated overtime and manipulated performance reviews now? I didn't reply. Aegis did. Sylvia's legal team responded with an aggressive 50-page appendix of API call logs, deployment histories, and a forensic timeline showing exactly when my code went live and exactly who tried to slap their name on it weeks later. Then Aegis's lead counsel dropped the hammer. "Your CEO's professional biography references his creation of a dynamic load balancer. Richard Vance is the sole recognized inventor. Kindly clarify how an executive with no recorded technical contributions to the project is claiming authorship of a patented process." Silence followed. And then, noise. Beautiful, chaotic, desperate corporate noise. One of Nebula's senior engineers, a guy named Toby who had always respected my work, leaked an internal memo to me through an encrypted email service. It was supposed to be strictly confidential, but the subject line was a gift. Croesus Protocol, Vance Fallout. The highlights were spectacular. Deactivate all blog posts referencing Engine Core V1 as in-house intellectual property. Purge internal communications from 2018 to 2020, involving code attribution discussions. Cancel Julian's panel appearance at the upcoming tech conference. Too risky. Legal exploring emergency countersuit, but confidence is extremely low. He has the receipts. I printed that last line out, framed it, and placed it on my desk. That was when the real game began. A headhunter I had ignored back in 2022 suddenly reached out, desperate to place me in a principal engineer role. 3 venture capital firms emailed, asking if I was interested in launching a spin-out startup. This was followed by an anonymous tip sent to 4 major technology news outlets, about the massive intellectual property battle brewing inside one of the Valley's most overvalued cloud startups. Guess who leaked it? Sylvia Cross. 2 days later, a leading tech publication ran the headline, "Cloud Darling Accused of Massive IP Theft by Former Veteran Engineer." Is it time to rewrite the narrative? They included a side-by-side photo of me in a faded sweater holding a whiteboard marker, and Julian giving a flashy keynote presentation in front of my exact architectural diagram, my arrows, my shorthand, even my distinct typo. Ballum misspelled as Blancer. They say revenge is a dish best served cold. I prefer it piping hot, poured directly over a quarterly earnings call, which incidentally was happening the following Monday. And I had just gained access to something exceptionally entertaining, their internal metrics dashboard. Let's just say retention rates weren't the only thing about to drop precipitously. Monday, 8:59 a.m. I sat at my new desk at Aegis, 3 high-definition monitors glowing like a command center. I had a cup of strong black coffee in hand. Nebula's Q2 earnings call started at 9 sharp. It was live-streamed, public open to stakeholders, industry journalists, and former employees with scores to settle. Julian's voice came through first. It sounded forced, overly cheerful, thick with corporate desperation. Good morning, everyone. We are thrilled to share another quarter of unprecedented innovation and strategic growth. I muted the audio. I wasn't there to listen to his lies. I was watching the telemetry dashboard. Over the weekend, Toby, the engineer who leaked the memo, had quietly provided me with read-only access to their system. They still hadn't fully air-gapped their internal networks. I didn't need to touch a single line of code or execute any commands. I just watched, because Aegis had flipped the switch that very morning. My engine, version 2.1, was now fully live on Aegis's infrastructure. Full rollout, identical architecture, vastly superior performance, and absolutely no licensing violations. Meanwhile, Nebula was broadcasting a live stream while their backend started to buckle under the strain in real time. API latency doubled, then it tripled. User login errors surged into the thousands. Their analytics dashboard, the very one I had built from scratch, spiked with angry red warning indicators. I unmuted the stream just in time to hear Julian's voice falter. We are currently seeing some temporary latency issues due to unexpected, high-volume load. Our engineering teams are actively addressing. And then the killing blow landed. One of Nebula's largest enterprise clients, a massive Fortune 100 logistics beast, had seamlessly switched platforms overnight to Aegis. To my engine, the kicker? That client's CTO posted a public message on social media at 9:14 a.m., excited to announce our new partnership with Aegis Systems. Lower latency, bulletproof security, smoother integration. Cheers to clean code and true innovation. The post exploded immediately. Developers started piling on, sharing screenshots, performance benchmarks, and side-by-side code comparisons. It was open season on Nebula. One prominent user posted, "Doesn't this architecture look incredibly familiar? Pretty sure Richard Vance demoed this underlying concept at a back-end summit years ago." Suddenly, my professional networking profile was inundated. Connection requests, consulting offers, and articles tagging me as the veteran engineer who built the machine and subsequently burned down the castle when they refused to pay him his due. The absolute best part occurred an hour later. Someone leaked an internal chat thread where Julian frantically typed, "Who the hell authorized his patent filing? Why wasn't this caught by compliance?" The response from their lead counsel was a single devastating line. "You explicitly told us not to waste billable hours on him, Julian." By 10:12 a.m., Nebula's stock had dipped by 14%. By 10:48 a.m., trading was halted due to excessive volatility. By noon, the company was trending globally under a hashtag regarding stolen corporate code. And I was sitting in a high-end steakhouse downtown, enjoying a perfectly cooked ribeye with Sylvia Cross, watching the entire facade unravel on a tablet. She didn't say anything for a long time, just methodically cutting her steak, her eyes locked on the plunging stock charts. Then she looked up at me. "You realize they are going to come for you with everything they have." I took a sip of water, completely unbothered. They already did, and now it's my turn to teach them about consequences. Nebula tried to play the victim card immediately. By Tuesday morning, the board of directors forced Julian onto a major financial news network for damage control. He was sweating visibly in a blazer that looked too tight, repeating phrases like regrettable miscommunication, legacy contributor, and my absolute favorite, we deeply value all our engineers, past and present, as part of the Nebula family. Meanwhile, their aggressive outside counsel was sending Aegis a cease and desist letter, acting as though they hadn't just spent the better part of a decade duct taping my intellectual property to their golden parachutes. Aegis's response was a masterclass in legal intimidation. Sylvia delivered a neatly packaged digital folder to their inbox titled Compliance Documentation and Receipts. Inside was a notarized certified copy of the original patent filing. Alongside it were 3 sworn, signed witness affidavits from former Nebula engineers, confirming I was the sole author of the engine. There were hundreds of screenshots of project management tickets, with my name attached to every major architectural breakthrough. And the crown jewel, a recorded time-stamped video call where Julian explicitly told me, "This isn't about individual credit, Richard. It's about the team moving fast and breaking things." I had anonymously forwarded that recording to Sylvia myself. Nebula didn't respond. Not publicly, not legally. But quietly in the dark, they started scrubbing the internet. Entire engineering blog entries vanished without a trace. A highly publicized white paper from their 2021 developer conference was suddenly pulled offline. A podcast episode featuring Julian gloating about his signature load balancer was mysteriously replaced with a 404 error page. And then came the first massive structural crack. Toby, the senior developer, resigned. He did it loudly and publicly on his professional network. He wrote, "As someone who watched Richard Vance carry this infrastructure through years of crunch culture, unpaid overtime, and relentless gaslighting, I refuse to pretend anymore. The leadership here is fundamentally broken. I am resigning effective immediately." The dominoes fell rapidly after that. 8 resignations followed that same week. Major institutional investors started demanding emergency board meetings. Then, the board finally made its move. Late Thursday night, someone from the inside, likely the overworked human resources analyst, who used to offer me sympathetic looks after every failed promotion cycle, sent me the one document I had fantasized about for years. An internal email thread. Subject, immediate termination. Target, Law Julian Thorne, CCEO. Reason, gross negligence, severe reputational damage, and failure to disclose material patent conflicts. It was done. He was ousted. I read the termination notice 5 times to ensure my eyes weren't deceiving me. For the first time in 8 long years, I exhaled without feeling a tight knot of anxiety in my chest. But I wasn't finished. Karma is satisfying but deliberate. Calculated design is divine. I printed out the termination thread on high-quality paper. I rolled it up neatly, slipped it into a sleek black gift tube, and the next morning, I stood on the sidewalk outside Nebula's corporate headquarters. I handed a courier envelope addressed to Julian to the front desk. Inside was the termination thread, a printed screenshot of his "We're a family here" chat message from years ago, and a single cheap plastic pen. A note was attached. "You should have given me the promotion." I stood outside and watched through the floor-to-ceiling glass as the security guards escorted him out of the building. He looked significantly older, his posture slumped, his eyes scanning the lobby like a man who had just watched his empire burn down brick by brick, line by line, function by stolen function. He clutched his small cardboard box of personal items. He saw me standing on the sidewalk, arms crossed. I offered no smile, no gloating rage, just the calm certainty of a man who had reclaimed his life's work. He stopped. He mouthed something angry, his face flushing red. I couldn't hear him through the thick, soundproof glass, but I didn't need to. Some endings don't require dialogue. They just require a witness to the destruction. The retaliatory lawsuit arrived 3 days later. It was a messy, desperate, highly performative piece of legal fiction. Nebula's new interim CEO had authorized a sprawling 60-page complaint claiming I had violated implied proprietary agreements and actively sabotaged their systems with malicious intent to cause financial ruin. It was almost cute. They attempted to paint me as a rogue, disgruntled developer who coerced junior staff into leaking trade secrets, as if a 65-year-old engineer possessed some kind of hypnotic mind control over millennials. Aegis's legal team, backed by unlimited resources, dismantled the lawsuit like a cheap toy. Their first response was brutal. Defendant Richard Vance was never under any binding contract for intellectual property transfer. The patent predates all active employment clauses and non-compete agreements. We strongly suggest you review your own deeply flawed human resources files. Furthermore, attempting to enforce a contract that does not exist constitutes a void ab initio situation. Their second response was a threat. If Nebula Cloud Dynamics wishes to pursue this frivolous litigation, Aegis Systems will require full, unredacted code audit logs, complete source control history, and unrestricted records of all internal executive communications regarding the Vance patent. The discovery phase will be exhaustive, public, and highly damaging to your remaining valuation. Please confirm your willingness to proceed. Spoiler alert, they did not confirm. By the following Friday, the lawsuit was quietly withdrawn with prejudice. There was no press release, no public statement of apology, just a silent, humiliating retreat. The only visible change was a minor edit to Nebula's website footer. The line boasting, powered by our proprietary dynamic load balancer technology, was erased entirely. Now it simply read, built for scale. Cowards. But what came next, what happened over the following year, was far better than revenge. It was about rewriting the future on my own terms. Aegis Systems went all in on my architecture. We launched it properly this time. It was a clean build, infinitely scalable, highly secure, and faster than anything else on the market. My name was on the patent, on the product documentation, and prominently displayed on the company homepage as chief architect. And you know what surprised me the most? People actually wanted to work for me. They didn't just tolerate me as the old guy in the corner. They didn't talk over me in meetings or smile while stealing my presentation slides. They wanted to collaborate, to ask complex questions, and to ensure everyone received credit for their ideas. It was a culture shock in the best possible way. One evening, late in the quarter, 2 junior developers pulled me aside after a grueling but successful deployment sprint. I tensed up instinctively, expecting them to complain about the workload or offer some insincere excuse for a missed deadline. Instead, one of them looked at me earnestly. Richard, we read all the articles about what happened with Nebula. The IP theft, the leaked memos, the whole thing. The other developer chimed in. That's exactly why we applied to work here at Aegis. You prove that executives can't just steal our work and discard us when we ask for what we're worth. I didn't cry. I was too old and too stubborn for tears in the office. But later that night, sitting in my home office, I stared at the battered, sticker-covered laptop I had used to rebuild the engine. I realized that the machine had started the fire, but I was the one who had finally struck the match. The industry had noticed, but one final loose thread still bothered me. I hadn't heard Julian Thorne's voice in months. Not since the day I watched him get escorted out of the glass lobby. Until a random Tuesday when an encrypted email landed in my personal inbox. There was no subject line, no greeting. Just one arrogant sentence. You really think this is over? I stared at the screen, took a sip of my coffee, and smiled. Not quite yet. Julian had made one last desperate move. Men like him rarely just disappear into obscurity. They rebrand, they mold themselves into consultants, strategic advisors, or visionary thought leaders. It turned out he had spent the last 6 months whispering into the ear of a mid-tier venture capital firm that was desperate to disrupt Aegis's market dominance. They threw together a Frankenstein competitor practically overnight. It had a sloppy, rushed user interface, a gutted backend, and an architectural framework that looked suspiciously familiar. Far too familiar. Their initial press release bragged about next-generation load distribution, claiming it was built entirely from the ground up to revolutionize the cloud space. They even quoted Julian directly. Finally, a product that relies on true innovation, not stolen foundations. Oh, they really wanted to go to war again. That was fine. This time, I didn't need to rely on backdoors, leaked memos, or rogue employees. I had massive momentum, unlimited funding, and an elite team of engineers who despised him just as much as I did. While Julian's new startup fumbled through embarrassing public demos that crashed mid-click, Aegis rolled out EdgeStream, our new flagship platform powered by Engine version 3.0. It was a complete rewrite, a technological monster that chewed through benchmark tests for breakfast and spat out performance graphs that looked like a raised middle finger to the competition. We aggressively offered early access to every single one of Julian's potential clients. By the end of the first month, 8 of their 12 prospective enterprise contracts had quietly migrated to Aegis. By the end of the quarter, the venture capital firm backing Julian realized they were bleeding money into a sinking ship. They abruptly pulled all remaining funding, citing a failure to meet basic technical milestones. It turns out that strategic visionaries cannot survive without actual strategy, vision, or the engineers they used to exploit. I finally ran into him again at the annual Cloud Infrastructure Tech Gala. There was an open bar, too much ambient lighting, and far too many cameras. I was standing near the VIP section when he approached. He had a drink in his hand and was wearing that brittle, condescending smile, like a bottle of expired cologne. "Richard," he said, affecting the tone of old friends catching up. "I suppose you win." I slowly tilted my head, studying him like a deprecated piece of code. "This was never a game, Julian." He glanced around the massive ballroom, seeing the Aegis Systems logo plastered everywhere, on the stage banners, on the attendee lanyards, on the massive digital displays. "I made a mistake," he muttered, his voice dropping so the surrounding crowd wouldn't hear. "Back then, I should have taken your request for a raise seriously." I took a slow sip of my expensive scotch. "You didn't make a mistake, Julian. You made a calculated decision." I stepped closer, lowering my voice. "And what you did to the older engineers at Nebula, pushing us out to avoid paying pensions and benefits. That borders on elder financial abuse under California Welfare and Institutions, Code Section 15.6.1030. You're lucky I only took your company and your reputation and didn't push for a criminal investigation." He paled, taking a step back. "You made a decision," I repeated, "and so did I." He didn't have a clever reply for that, but someone standing behind me did. One of our new software architects, a brilliant young guy who had been watching the exchange with wide eyes, spoke up loud enough to draw the attention of the surrounding executives. "Hey, Richard, is that the guy who committed breach of fiduciary duty and got fired for trying to forge a retroactive NDA?" A dozen people turned to look. Julian Thorne flinched, his brittle smile shattering completely. He turned and walked away, disappearing into the crowd alone. I didn't follow him. I had a keynote address to deliver. 10 minutes later, I stood on stage in front of 3,000 industry professionals. I didn't tell a story about petty revenge. I didn't even talk about victory. I spoke about reclamation, about the importance of building something undeniably yours, protecting your intellectual property, and watching the corporate world scramble to catch up when you finally realize your own worth. Afterward, during the Q&A session, a seasoned engineer near the back asked me what advice I had for older developers who felt invisible in an industry obsessed with youth. I smiled, adjusted the microphone, and said, "File the patent. Refuse to sign away your rights. And then, when they tell you you're just a mechanic, light the match." The aftermath at Aegis Systems wasn't just a honeymoon phase. It became a permanent cultural shift. Sylvia Cross made good on her promises, ensuring that every engineer, regardless of age or title, had a seat at the table when architectural decisions were made. The EdgeStream platform didn't just dominate the market. It redefined the industry standard for transparent, ethical engineering practices. We implemented strict policies against undocumented crunch time and mandated that all intellectual property contributions were properly attributed and compensated. For me, it wasn't just about the technology anymore. It was about leaving a legacy, that couldn't be erased or stolen by the next smooth-talking executive. As for Toby and the other engineers who had walked out of Nebula Cloud Dynamics in protest, they didn't struggle to find their footing. Sylvia and I personally ensured they were offered competitive roles at Aegis. They brought with them a sense of camaraderie forged in the fires of a toxic workplace. But here, that bond was channeled into building something sustainable. The younger developers, those who had joined Aegis specifically because of the public stand I took, flourished under mentorship programs that prioritized genuine skill transfer over corporate climbing. The fear of having their hard work co-opted was replaced by a drive to innovate fearlessly. Julian Thorne's fall from grace was absolute and unrecoverable. The venture capital world is small, and its memory for failure is long. After the collapse of his desperate startup attempt, he became a pariah. The rumors of his attempted forgery, the breach of fiduciary duty, and his blatant disregard for the Warren Act during Nebula's final days made him toxic to any serious investment firm. Last I heard, he was trying to rebrand himself yet again, this time as a wellness and productivity coach for mid-level managers. A fitting, hollow role for a man who never understood the actual value of the work he claimed to oversee. Looking back on the 80-hour weeks, the gaslighting, and the sheer audacity of a CEO who thought he could claim ownership of a man's mind, I realized that the patent wasn't just a legal shield, it was a line drawn in the sand. At 65, I had finally learned that your worth isn't determined by the title a company refuses to give you, but by the undeniable reality of what you can build. The industry will always try to extract every ounce of value from its creators, but they can only take what you allow them to. I built the machine, I held the patent, and in the end, I was the one who controlled the switch.